So my talk is called Building a Startup, and I added in brackets in a pandemic, just based on the last couple of weeks. So as Chan sort of alluded to, for the last decade, I worked in digital agencies as a designer and a developer. I started out as a designer, developer, and then sort of doubled down on development once I realized I was actually spending more time in code and in the browser designing things. So that's kind of what led to that change. But for the last 3 months, I've been building a startup called Figmatic full-time. And I'm just going to kind of talk about that for a little bit. So we build premium Figma plugins that are designed to replace people in your design team. You can kind of check out the website later. I'm not going to go too far into it. So first things to note from the first few months is the cool things are having no managers, no meetings, and no agile. So magically removing these things has made work fun and productive once again. So that's been really neat. But before I kind of kickstart a little bit, I'm just going to rewind 12 months really briefly. So 12 months ago, I discovered life after the red pill. So as Chan mentioned, I was co-running the DesignOps meetup for the first year. And then I decided to leave and sort of focus on other things. But there was certainly a void left there after I walked away. So it opened me up to probably a 4 to 6 week period of sort of shutting myself off from everybody and just being very introspective and just thinking about what I wanted to do next. And this question I come back to very, very often over the last 6 or 7 years. And it's from a book called 0 to 1. And the question is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? So I have a few answers for this, but the one I'm going to touch on at the moment would be that I believe that we've been living through a design and development workflow stagnation for roughly the last 20 years. And I'm just going to sort of give a little bit of context around my thinking of this. Hopefully not go too deep with it, but I think you'll see where I'm coming from at least. And by definition, most of you should disagree with me on this kind of important truth that I believe. So it wouldn't be a talk unless I quoted something from the fountainhead. So the hardest thing to explain is the glaringly evident, which everybody has decided not to see. And this is kind of the way that my mind is when I'm talking about this topic, because it just seems like everyone's got blinders on and no one really wants to think about the hard questions or really look at where we're at compared to where we've come from. So to kind of start off from 20 years ago, this is a quote taken from an article, a post from John Alsop, the founder of Web Directions, called The Tao of Web Design. And it was posted almost exactly 20 years ago this week. So he said, it's time to move on, to embrace the web as its own medium. It's time to throw out the rituals of the printed page and to engage the medium of the web and its own nature. He wrote this 20 years ago. And if you told me it was written last week, I would still think that it's a new article. And that just signifies that really we haven't really got past that sort of print idea just yet. 10 years later and 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago exactly as well, the famous responsive web design article came out. And he wrote, Ethan wrote, "This is our way forward. Rather than tailoring disconnected designs to each and ever increasing number of web devices, we can treat them as facets of the same experience." So that was 10 years ago. So we had 20 years, then 10 years. But today, 10 years later, we still use the term responsive web design instead of it just becoming absorbed into the term web design. And to me, this seems as if we talk about it as if it were both new and optional, none of which are true. And somewhat sort of hypocritically, we also at the exact same time use these other terms for arbitrary fixed sizes, which aren't responsive, like desktop, tablet, and mobile. If you've looked in a design file in the last year, you've probably seen layers and frames named with these these things. And again, to extend on that, the language that we use around design and development is very telling. So, we've got words like handoff designs, slicing up designs, inspecting designs, bridging the gap between design and development, and pixel perfect. And these are all kind of tells that something is a little bit off. So, to keep going down the rabbit hole a little bit, you've got terms, again, like design thinking, which in and of itself is fine, but these terms kind of distract us from the need to actually think about design at all. And the speed of new articles and tweets that we see each day also fool us into believing the propaganda that things are just moving so quickly. We can't really even keep up with all the radical progress. It's so hard to even keep up to date, and things are just progressing at this sort of rapid rate that our heads can barely stay on. Again, not having a go at this specific trend, but just things like new UI trends, like neomorphism, they give the illusion that there is a new future on the horizon simply by covering our dated present with a fresh coat of paint. And, the reality, as Mark was sort of touching on, I think sort of the kind of reading between the lines, I think many people think design system just means a tidy sketch file, which is by definition always outdated, containing pictures that emulates parts of a website. And so the reality is that we're actually, our designs are made with tools that have no relationship at all to the medium that they're actually being used in by real people. So this to me, I thought about this yesterday, is perhaps the most telling fact of the complete breakdown of our design and development workflow is that every design portfolio that I looked at when I was at my last agency never included the links of the websites that they actually designed. And that means that something has really gone wrong. If nobody wants to show the URL of the thing that they actually designed, then something has really gone wrong along the way. So to me, that's like a sort of a tell that we've really messed up. So if you've attended this meetup before, you'll know that the tagline and the mission of it is that we believe that the distance between design and development should be 0. So I'll probably get into that a little bit, but I think Mark kind of already alluded to this in his talk. And to be clear, I'm excluding Mark from any of this criticism. He's one of the few people actually thinking about this and trying to get us to a new future that actually looks radically different from today. But I guess to be more concise on this and more related to the business I'm starting is that I believe that anything that exists inside of a screen design tool is always more valuable outside of it. And you could kind of take the next step and then say, production code and data is actually the source of truth for your designs. Never in history will a user of your website be looking inside of your sketch file or your Photoshop document. There's just no relationship between the customer. So this is really what DesignOps was meant to be. The term kind of got hijacked, and it's if you read about what is DesignOps, there's a lot of propaganda out there how it's more about management and overseeing design and development teams and making sure that the information flow and the handoff processes are all going according to plan. But in our future, in the DesignOps future that Chan and I defined, this role that people say DesignOps is actually irrelevant. It's actually removed completely. When the distance between design and development is 0, there is no longer anything to manage. So that role is non-existent, and it's actually the opposite of what we defined it to be. So I'm just going to briefly touch on the tipping point for me personally. So a few months after I finished co-running DesignOps, at work I was working on a design system for the better part of a year for a very big e-commerce platform. And I had done the entire thing in code. I had built everything in code, all of the low-level stuff, right up to the kind of full views and states and everything that Mark sort of outlined. And I held on. I pushed back against this for months, like people were trying to sort of hijack the ideas and all that sort of stuff. And I got to about a month before the project ended, and for some reason we had to send the client static JPEGs or images. And I said, that's ridiculous. We've got this live link here where they can look at it on anything and see the real thing. And they're like, no, we just have to do it. So long story short, one afternoon I spent 4 hours screenshotting every view and every state of every page in Chrome and put it into an InVision link to share with the client. And we went in there the next week to meet with them to present them these designs. And they said, all right, these are looking really good, but we'd love to get the sketch files so we can hand it over to our developers in the Philippines and get them to build it. And I said, oh, no, you don't understand. These are JPEGs, but I actually took them from the HTML that I already built. And he's like, yeah, we just need the sketch files. And I was like, oh my God, it just turned into a mess. So long story short, none of the HTML was used, and we had to actually use I had thankfully already set up the HTML to Sketch extension. So I rendered all the components out to Sketch files and just sent them that. And that's kind of what we did. But this was really the tipping point for me, where I realized I had lost the DesignOps war, even in my own workplace. So you can probably tell by now that I believe it's time to really start getting back to the future. So the question that I asked myself was, again, from the book 0 to 1, how can you achieve your 10-year plan in the next 6 months? And I like these questions because they force you to reframe it in a completely different way than you would usually want to kind of answer it. So what do I want to be doing? I want to be building design automation tools full-time and be profitable doing it. So the answer to that question was, the way for me to do it was I really needed to put some skin in the game, quit my job, and self-fund my own company. This was the only answer I could come up with in order to at least have a shot of getting to where I wanted to be. So in reality, that looks like going from a lead developer's salary back down to 0. So I did a few things to kind of counterbalance this after I decided to do this. So I gave 4 months notice because I wanted to have a really smooth transition between me and my replacement and sort of leave the agency in a better place than I found it. But also to build up a bit more savings. So I saved up for those 4 months. I moved apartment to a less expensive one. I sold my car because I realized I wouldn't be leaving the house for the foreseeable future. So you guys who have been quarantined for the last 2 weeks, I've been self-quarantined for the last 3 months of my own choice. So I also sold a lot of my childhood Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo games and my Nikes, and just cut down expenses everywhere else. And then I've never started a company before, but I do know that having any plan is probably better than having no plan at all. So here's a rough outline of what I kind of planned out. So the 5 things I thought I was going to do was, number 1, do not compete, charge from day 1, ship fast and often, talk to customers, and do things that don't scale. And this advice is probably common, but I decided to actually follow it, or actually do it. So going from 0 to 1, this really just means that I'm not going to be doing things like building the 10th. I don't want to be the 10th lorem ipsum plugin or the 5th spell checking plugin. I want to build things that currently don't exist but would be valuable to exist in the future. So I've built 5 plugins so far. This is the one I kind of built to learn how to build Figma plugins, at least at a base level. So this one just literally exports production-ready favicon packages for progressive web apps and websites from Figma. The next one handles image compression. So there's no image compression in Figma, which is strange. So this compresses JPEGs, PNGs, and SVGs directly from Figma. And I actually just got PDF compression working today, so I'll be shipping that shortly too. Bannerify, this was a plugin I built to animate and export production-ready banners from Figma to HTML. It supports like all the ad networks, vanilla HTML, all that sort of stuff. And it'll export, 100 of them in like 5 seconds. Pixelay is one where it'll actually overlay your Figma designs on top of your real development build, so you can actually get a sense of how they line up. And then we've got Crypto, which is a new one I've just built as well. And this is almost a strategic plugin in some sense, because I've been talking to a lot of people who aren't on the Figma train yet, and the feature that they're requesting is they need to have password protection on their designs. So Figma sort of does this, but not the way that they want. They just want a password protected thing. So I just built that and releasing that soon. So as I said, charging from day one, plans to make cream, cash rules everything around me, validating real value quickly by charging for products. It's easy. It's common advice to say, release everything for free. Just give it away for free. You'll build up, recognition and you can charge later. I decided to do the opposite and charge from day one. There is a trial period, but once you've exceeded that, you do have to buy a license. So I found this is actually a really good way of figuring out how valuable something actually is. So that's been really good. The other thing I really wanted to do was not fall into the trap of just building things for months on end, hiding away in the corner, not showing anybody, not knowing if anyone actually wants the thing I think is going to solve a problem, and just get it out there while I'm still embarrassed with the product. So I've been building very, very quickly, and the way I've been able to do that is by using components, and I use that on a plugin level when I design my components, and at my website level. It's all component based. And I ship probably like at least a couple of times a day, either to my website or to the plugins I've got up online. So the weird thing is I actually don't use Figma for designing my websites or plugins at all. I've never designed anything in Figma. I design everything in code. Everything that I've designed for my website and my plugins, it's all in code. It's all with components, and it's extremely quick and extremely I've actually redesigned the website like 3 times, and it took me like a couple of hours every time to completely redesign it, because it's fundamentally built to be very, very adaptable. So that's a pro tip. If you take anything away from this talk and Mark's talk, it's that designing with code works. And not only does it work, but it's actually faster than drawing pictures of websites inside tools, and you get the benefit of having real content. Which is such a big one. Talking to customers. So I've been talking to customers, existing and potential customers, and that's been really great because I get super good feedback, and they actually help me develop new ideas, and I can build relationships with them. So I can go back to them and check in and get some ideas of what's broken at their company and all that sort of stuff. It also helps convert customers into paying customers too, really effectively. And then I did things that don't scale. So I've just got 5 things in here. So things that don't scale, number 1 would be extreme customer service. So if someone messages me on chat or email, I'll reply to them within a minute, and they'll usually have a feature request or a question, and my reply to their feature request will be that the feature request has been deployed. And so I'll get feedback like, whoa, your team is so amazing. And, I'll sort of go back and forth on the answer of either telling them it's just me in my kitchen or, making them think we have some sort of massive enterprise running down here. Things that don't scale, number 2, manually cold emailing over 100 agencies and offering them to pay me to talk with me, pay them to talk with me. So obviously this doesn't scale over time, but upfront, it's a good way to actually kind of talk to people who might want your product. And I've actually met and talked to a bunch of them, and none of them have actually wanted me to pay them. Number 3 would be just manually posting, linking, and commenting everywhere possible online. to sort of blitzscale these initial product launches and kind of get a little bit of a growth curve starting at the beginning, and then building that up over time. The other thing that probably doesn't scale is, at the moment, I've been averaging about 1 to 2 new plugins per month, developing them. Over time, that'll probably slow down because I'm going to be working on more complex products over time. And the last one would be working 10 to 12 hours a day, every day on this business. That may or may not scale. We'll see how the mental breakdown situation goes later, but for now, it's going well. So if you're thinking this all sounds incredible, I would probably just say that building a startup might not be actually the right choice for everybody. There are certainly easier ways to make money, and those are fairly obvious. What consulting would be one. I've turned down a bunch of consulting offers. You can very, very easily as a developer make over $1,000 a day consulting. I've been turning those down because the time cost is too high for me to be away from working on the business. So just consider that if you are thinking about starting a company. There's probably other ways to do it if you only want to make money. So to put that in perspective, my current income is roughly less than 5% of what it was back when I was getting a salary. That'll obviously grow over time, but that's why I needed that to self-fund and have that cushion to start with in order to, last, basically. So to sort of make this somewhat relevant to the title, I thought I should probably answer the question of, are there actually any advantages to building a startup during a pandemic and impending recession that'll obviously be happening in the next quarter? And I came up with a few. So one would be there's definitely less competition. So less people will be inclined to start new companies, and old companies will not survive. So overall, there is actually less competition. In the case of COVID-19, there'll be more remote workers, which means an uptick in Figma usage, considering the options for collaborative design tools are very, very slim, and Figma is by far the best one. So that may or may not lead to more use of my products. And I would say that in these times, less waste inside of companies should be tolerated. So people will be wanting to find ways to save time, save money, and improve efficiencies inside the workplace. And that's kind of what my plugins are all about. And then fourth, more of a personal one would be that it's just an outlet for me to focus. It's been great to not get too distracted by all the news and all that sort of stuff over the last few weeks, particularly. I just keep the routine going and just keep the blinders on with working on my projects or my products. So to sort of sum up, if you're thinking, well, you're talking about all these futuristic things, but at the moment you're not doing anything too crazy. The reason for that is I have a list of things that I want to automate, specifically that I wanted to automate in digital agencies. So I have a list of those things. There's about 10 of them. So I'm about halfway there. So I want to automate all those things first, get those done, which is good because they don't take as long. Hopefully I can get some revenue to keep the business going. And then that'll free up my time to focus on the new tools that we need today, that I hope will exist in the future, either from me or from others. So that's it. I hope that's been somewhat interesting. As I said, it was kind of a pivoted lightning talk update and tried to add a few more points in there. But yeah, if you want to learn more, you can just jump on my website, which is figmaticapp.com. And there's details about some of the things I'm doing on there. So thank you, and sorry, as always, not sorry.
That was awesome. Thanks, Adam. I saw the comment chat blowing up. Everybody.
Are they all just for me to rap more? Or?
For sure.
Because that's probably what's going to happen. Yeah.
That's awesome. Some really good insights there, and thanks for sharing. we might jump into a few questions. There's a few that's come in, so let's have a look here.
Yeah, for sure.
First one from Richie. Let's invite Richie up onto the stage.
Cool.
Sending the invite now.
Mm-hmm.
Might be having some trouble. I'll also invite Dan up.
Yo.
There you go. Hey, Richie. Where are you calling in from, man?
From the inside of my house near Melbourne.
Cool. In the panic room, or?
Yeah, in the control center. Thanks, man. That was a great talk. Yeah, my question was about kind of the business side of things, I suppose, more than the product. So you talked a little bit about selling from the start. And I was just keen to see if you have, or if you've landed on, or how you got to the pricing model of your products. And yeah, if you tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, pricing's difficult. There's a lot of things you have to learn starting a business certainly as a solo founder, things that I haven't had to do before. Pricing was one of them. So I did research as much as I could on pricing, but at the end of the day, it's sort of abstract, and it's also particularly hard when you're the first person in this space actually charging for things. So there's nothing to there's actually no reference point to know what else is in the market and what people are actually paying for these things. So at the end of the day, I had to base it on sort of value-based pricing based on what I knew these things cost in an agency environment. So for example, with the banner one, I know that process of getting banners that have been designed into code, some agencies, that takes up to a week of a developer's time just to get that all working. Certainly if you're dealing with like dozens and dozens. And the thing with all these things are as well is they're all recurring problems. So they happen over and over and over. So that was how I landed on the subscription model, first of all. And then the second thing I did was figure out roughly how much time these products were going to save in an average company, and then make that appealing based on the pricing. So really, I just came up with it based on what I knew these things cost in an agency, and if you can automate them for less than 5% of that cost, then it seems like a fair price.
Oh, so you took it. So even though you're giving them a product that will be able to do this like continuously, you worked it out on a kind of a job project cost.
Yeah, so basically, even if you only used it once a month, it would already pay for itself.
Gotcha.
And if you only needed to use it for 1 month, you could pay for 1 month and then not have it the next month. Or if you just use it ongoing, you might want to get like the annual version where you get a discount for paying up front, and then you can just use it as many times as you want for the year. So that's roughly some of the thoughts I had around the pricing. Yeah. But it's something I'll be experimenting with over time. As I've added new features to some of them, I've increased the pricing a little bit every time too. So at the start, I was probably undercharging just because I wasn't as confident in what I was releasing. As I said, I was embarrassed by the first versions by design. So as I've made them better, I've been more confident, and getting the feedback from people has given me the confidence to charge what they're worth.
And who's buying? Is it like local? Yeah, who's the most? Who's picking up on it the most? Is it agencies?
Well, I set out with the idea that I was going to specifically target agencies, but I realized I was slightly off with that. A lot of agencies do, but it's also like product companies. It's also product companies and just weird companies like into that game, like PUBG, like the PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds game. that company like has a team subscription to one of them, and it's just like, so now I've just pivoted to appealing to design teams because they're all designers and they're all just design teams. Doesn't matter what the company is really.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Good
That's
to see you guys soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Richie.
Later.
See ya.
All right. We got a couple of other people had some questions here. Let's see if we can invite some, here we go. Hey, Mel. Welcome.
Hey, stranger.
Hey. Thanks for the talk. Always good.
Right.
Thanks for the wrap too.
It's okay.
I just wanted to know, you said that like you action customer feedback or user feedback super quickly. Like how do you make that decision on what you actually action?
In terms of actually implementing a suggestion?
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good suggestion. I can see how that fits in with like my vision or whatever.
I've been lucky in the sense that everyone who has come to me with suggestions have all been really good. And one of those things where it's like, why didn't I think of that myself? So it hasn't really been a case of like backlogging some of the lesser okay ones. You know, like with the image one, it'll be like, oh, does it support SVG or PDF? And it's like, no, but it definitely should. And I'm gonna get to doing that. So those things don't take like an hour, but there's certainly other things that are really quick to fix or to add in. So yeah, those ones I'll definitely do. But yeah, if I get something that's not aligned with what I want for the product, then you know I'll probably just not. I'll just tell them I'm not interested in adding that for the time being.
So they've just been like super obvious, and you're like, oh yeah, just gonna do it.
So far, they've just been really obvious. Like with the image one, my interface for that wasn't what it looks like now. And someone emailed me and he was like, you know, I love this plugin. You know, it does exactly what I want, but it'd just be really neat if the interface for selecting images was exactly the same as what the native image selection export thing looks like. And so I was like, oh, that totally makes sense because the learning curve shouldn't actually be any higher than what the normal exporting module is in Figma. So that was a really good piece of customer feedback that I added straight away.
And like, can I ask like why do it straight away then and not like tomorrow?
Because I want to develop a reputation for just being like really good with customer service, like remarkably good with customer service. Where if they talk to somebody, they'll sort of say, "Oh yeah, I by the time he replied to me, it was like added," sort of thing. And as I said, this is why I listed it under things that don't scale, because I can't do that when I get more customers, because it's just not possible. But for now, every time I've done it so far, it's converted to a paying customer as well. So that might be worth noting. So it seems like people appreciate the level of service.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right.
Cool. Thanks, Mel. Cool. I think I'm just inviting someone else to the screen for another question. We do have one here that I'll read out on behalf of Dan. So
sure.
What's the number one thing holding back the wholesale adoption of DesignOps? Bonus question: what will it take to overcome?
Oh, that's how long do we have? What's stopping the wholesale adoption would be the fact that nobody's thinking about it. I don't think most people think that we have a problem on our hands. So I don't think it's even a case of there's one camp that is anti what we're talking about and pro what they're already doing. In some sense, they're not even wrong about what they're doing because they're not thinking about any alternative to it. So I would say that, I guess Mark sort of said it as well, but the cultural shift is probably the biggest thing. It's this complacency. It's the we've accepted our fate to some extent. You know, this idea that this is just how things are done, and that's how we've done them for 20 years. You know, the tooling's had a fresh coat of paint every few years, but the fundamental way we go about handing off pictures to developers hasn't really changed, and that it takes people to understand that it's actually a problem to work that way, and there's a future where that looks different and is actually better for the end product. So I would say, it's tempting to use words like awareness, because awareness only goes so far. But I do think that not enough people think that it's a problem, and nothing's going to change unless you hit a critical mass of things that are as easy and as effective, or much more effective, but they have to be close enough to what people are already doing to kind of edge them into this way of doing things. And then over time, we'll kind of hopefully get to something that looks quite different, similar to what the Playroom example was. Like that looks much closer to me like the future than, kind of just incrementally improving what we've been doing with these design tools that we already have. So it's a hard question to answer, unfortunately.
Awesome, thank you. Got another question here. I'll just invite Fiona up. While we're getting ready, we've got a question here from Inda. So how do you sketch or visualize your products? You mentioned not using Figma, so from your mind visually straight to code. How does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly how I do it. I don't wireframe anything on paper. As I said, I don't do any mock-ups in Figma or any design tools. I'll usually start with, if it's a plugin, I'll just start with the functional side of things, like what does this UI need for it to actually work, and then I can focus on layout a bit later. So at the start, I'll just kind of throw a few buttons in there, throw some input fields in there, and then I can always improve the layout and things like that later. But and for the website, it's the same sort of thing. I will put in all the content that I know I need to have on the page, and then I will just work in code and actually style it. But I don't even need to do either of those things really anymore, because as I said, I've built out a really solid sort of component workflow. So if I want to add a pricing table to a page, similar to the Playroom example, I can just add a tag that says pricing, and add a few properties to it, and instantly have that properties table. So it'll take about 10 seconds to get a new pricing table onto a page. So I guess I've got the data or the content first, and then the aesthetic sort of stuff is laid on top of that. But it's all abstracted. So if I wanted to change every single heading font on my website, I could do that, by the time I finish answering this question and deploy it. It's really quick. So, but I guess if you're asking about the initial kind of phase of designing things, it would be something like that. I would get all the content into the code base or the page, and then sort of figure out what components I might want to build to handle those things. And then I can just start composing all these things and seeing how it all kind of looks. But it's very quick. It's not a difficult thing to do, at least for me. I don't know if it's not that for everyone, but.
Awesome. I have one last question here from Fiona. So, would you see the future of design learning to become more cross-collaborative, where design schools should now reevaluate their course structure to be more code-based than a beautiful XD Figma sketch prototype, especially with the current circumstances that we're living in, remote classes, etc.?
Well, I would just start by saying you can never go wrong with learning code. If you're a designer, at the minimum, you'll become a better designer. So even if you don't fully embrace some of these ideas, there's no question that you'll become a better designer. But I would say that as Mark sort of said, it's going to be a little while off. I think some of these design schools and boot camps and things like that are already like quite far behind the 8 ball on the acceptance accepted ways of doing things. So I've just realized this question wasn't for me, but anyway, that's kind of half my answer on it.
Cool. I've just invited Mark up. I'm not sure if he's still available. Yep, Mark's coming on up. I'm sure that he'll have an opinion as well. Hey, Mark, welcome back.
Hey, sorry, I had to go get my good microphone. What was the question?
Oh, let me reframe it. So it comes from. Lost it. That's okay. Where are we here? All right, question from Fiona. So would you see the future of design learning to become more cross-collaborative, where design schools should now reevaluate their course structure to be more code-based rather than a beautiful XD Figma sketch prototype, especially given the current circumstances, remote classes, etc.?
This is a really hard one. I mean, I sort of touched on this one earlier as well, but I mean, what's really hard is we're sort of at a bit of an impasse in the industry, I think, because like if you think about, like, imagine you're in their shoes, right, and you are running a design school. Like, even if you believe these things, if you want to equip people for the industry, you probably would feel like you're going to set them up for failure almost if you teach them the ways of the Force. Mm-hmm. I've been watching too much Star Wars. Yeah, that's why it's such a hard problem, I think, because so many things in our industry have built up around this assumption that we're sort of off in our silos. Mm-hmm. And it means that, yeah, like, I'm not sure it is the right call for, like, if you are running a school for designers, like, I'm not sure it is the right call for you right now to start doing that. So it's a really hard one.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be really interesting. Sort of, we've already seen, like myself, I'm third week in from working from home, and company of 1,500 odd, and we've already seen efficiencies in certain workflows. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting for everyone to sort of, across different industries, to see what comes out the other side of this, and sort of, do we continue to go into our offices, or do we just use our bedrooms?
So it feels like the question's really just, should designers learn how to code, which we probably won't get into right now.
Well, I think that I realize asking if designers should code as a question has a lot of baggage. Because code, I mean, one of the things I keep saying when I talk to designers about this is one problem I have with this whole question of should designers code is it's acting like code is a monolith. Like, code's just a medium. Like, it can mean a million different things. And like the work I'm doing with Playroom, I hope would be a good example of how code doesn't have to be this really esoteric thing that only developers can understand. Like, there are simpler things you can do that's still coding. Yeah. I mean, that's how we all get started, right? Like, I mean, I didn't start building really complicated things. I started with really simple things. Mm-hmm. And often it's just, you get bit by often developers are that way inclined just because they got bitten by the bug, right? Like they got addicted to that level of power, basically, like getting the computer to do a bunch of work for them in an area that they cared about. And I hope that, like, for me, I think that these UI libraries that are really focused on components, I'm hoping that they'll draw in a bunch of designers, because it lets them build tools that map to the way they think about design. Like, that's the way I think about building design systems, is I'm trying to make components that make me a better designer.
Yep.
Like if there are rules about what makes a good design, like I can make a component that enforces those rules and makes it really easy to use. And then I feel like when I put on my design hat and I'm trying to build something out, even though I'm working in code, my designs look better. But and I think that libraries like React give us something that actually lets you be a better designer if you really embrace it. So I would say that, like, if you're learning, if you want to be a designer today, if you're learning to be a designer today, like I think teaching them something like React and how to create components, designers would find that quite addictive very quickly once they get their head around it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it's where I started back in the 90s. Like I started making websites code first. So, you know, and then obviously went down the design path, but now I love I rub my hands together when, you know, I've done some designs and working with the developer, I'm like thinking in my head, I can't wait to see this in code because it's always so much more crisp. It's like, yeah, that's nice. So I'm always excited to sort of see that. And I think it's really good now that we're, you know, coming back around these conversations of, you know, working really closely together. So, you know, as Adam was saying, it's that goal of, you know, moving closer to zero. So it's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we might leave it there for now. That was really awesome. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Adam, for joining us.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
And we'll chat soon.
Thank you.